Disclaimer, my tutorials do not teach you how many stitches to do because everyone's stitch gauge is different. Instead, I teach you how to go off based off of your measurements. For this tutorial, you will need yarn of your choice. I recommend a size 4 or lower, a crochet hook, the recommended size for your yarn, measuring tape, scissors, and a sewing needle. A little tip, if you would prefer your cup to have more length rather than width, I would suggest to make the base of the first row longer than the measurements from the bottom of the breast to the nipple / center of the breast. And if you would want it to be wider instead of having more length, I would suggest making the base to be shorter than the measurement from the bottom of the breast to the nipple / center of the breast. To start off, you're going to create a slip knot. So wrap the yarn around 2 fingers and put your hook through the hole and grab and pull. And then you want to tighten it. And then you want to chain 2, so yarn over and pull through, yarn over, pull through. And then you're going to start with the foundation half double crochets. So you yarn over and go into the very first chain that you made. Go through it, yarn over and pull through. You will have 3 loops on your hook. You want to yarn over and go into the very first hook only. And then again, you will end up with 3 loops. Yarn over one more time and go through all 3 loops, and this counts as your first stitch, your first foundation half double crochet stitch. For the second stitch, you yarn over and you go through the bottom of the previous stitch. And when you go through the bottom, you want to make sure you go through both loops that there are at the bottom. You yarn over and pull through the stitch, and then you end up with 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over, go through the first loop only. You'll end up with 3 loops again. Yarn over, go through all 3 loops. That is your second stitch. Again, go to the bottom of the previous stitch. Yarn over and pull through. You end up with 3 loops on your hook. And then you're going to yarn over again. Pull through the first loop only, end up with 3 again, yarn over and go through all 3, and that is your third stitch. Yarn over, go through the bottom stitch, yarn over and pull through, yarn over, go through the first stitch, first loop only, yarn over again, go through all 3 loops. You're going to continue this until you reach the measurement from the bottom of the breast to the nipple or to the center of the breast, whichever is applicable. So you just continue with your foundation half double crochets until you reach the needed amount of inches or centimeters that you need. So mine is about 3.5, which is 12 foundation half double crochet stitches for me. So once I reach the 3.5 mark, I'm going to continue with the rest of the row. So just crochet until the needed measurement that you need for this section. So at the end of this, I'm just going to do a regular half double crochet into the previous stitch. So yarn over, go through the bottom, yarn over, pull through, and then you're going to go through all 3 loops this time. So yarn over, go through all 3 loops, and then you're going to chain 1 and then flip it like so. So that way you're working at the bottom of the stitches from the previous row. So you're going to flip it and you're going to do half double crochets into the bottom of the stitches. So I'm going to yarn over and go into this stitch, yarn over, and then there's 3 loops, yarn over and go through all 3 loops. Into the very same stitch, I'm going to do another half double crochet, so yarn over and go into the same stitch, pull through, yarn over and go through all 3 loops. So that way it is a nice turn, like so. And then into the rest of the stitches, you're going to do 1 half double crochet. So yarn over, go into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through, you'll have 3 loops, yarn over, go through all 3. Yarn over, go through the stitch, yarn over, pull through, you'll have 3 loops, yarn over, go through all 3. Yarn over, go through, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, go through all 3. You're going to continue with the half double crochets until the rest of the row. And what I like to do, I like to hold this end over here somehow, so that way as I do my half double crochets, I'm weaving this end through the stitches. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. You can always weave it in later, but this is what I do to save time. And for the sake of the tutorial, I'm just going to cut this end off now. So this is row 1. So for row 1, you basically crocheted on both ends of the same row. So on this end, you should have the same amount of stitches that you have on this end. So for me, I have 13 stitches on this end, and on this end, I have 13 stitches. And now that I'm done with that, I'm just going to chain 1. And to chain 1, you just yarn over and pull through. And then you turn your work. Normally, this does not count as an extra stitch, but for this, it will. So this turning chain will count as a stitch. So for the next stitch, you yarn over and go through this stitch here. Yarn over, pull through, yarn over and go through. And once again, this row will be filled with half double crochets. So yarn over, go through the next stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, go through all 3. Yarn over, go through this stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, go through all 3. Yarn over, go through the stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, go through all 3. And you will repeat the same thing until you get to this hole at the top.
So yarn over, go through, yarn over, go through, go through.
So once you reach this end, the top, since it will be like this is considered the top. Where the chain 1 from the previous row was, you're going to put 2 half double crochets into here. So yarn over, go through the hole, yarn over and pull through, yarn over and go through all 3, yarn over, go through the hole, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, go through all 3, and then you're going to chain 1. You're going to turn, and you're going to do another 2 half double crochets into this same hole. So yarn over, go through, yarn over, go through. And this is how the top of each row will be made. So into each and every single hole, you will stitch 2 half double crochets, chain 1, and then do another 2 half double crochets. I'm going to continue with the rest of the row. So yarn over, go into the very next stitch, go through it, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, go through all 3 loops, yarn over, go through, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, go through all 3 loops, and you're just going to continue with your half double crochets into the rest of the row. So at the end of this row, you're going to chain 1, turn your work, so yarn over, go through, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, go through all 3, and you're just going to continue with half double crochets for the rest of this row until you get to the top. So do make sure that you go through the stitch over here, the first stitch that was apart from the hole at the bottom. Go through there, and then when you reach the hole up here, you're going to put 2 half double crochets in it. So yarn over, go through the hole. You'll have 3 loops, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, go through the hole, pull through, you'll have 3 loops again, yarn over, go through all 3. So then you chain 1, you turn around, yarn over, put another 2 half double crochets into the same hole, and this is what it will end up looking like. If you ever get confused on how many rows you are doing, just count the holes in the middle and make sure to count the top hole as well, because sometimes it can be clumped together as so, since there are no stitches inside. So 1, 2, 3. This is my 3rd row, and that is how you determine how many rows you are doing in case you ever get confused trying to count. So again, for the rest of this row, you're going to continue with your half double crochets. So yarn over, go through, pull through, yarn over, go through all 3. You're just going to continue with your half double crochets. So the second row will be the only row that increases by 2. The rest of the rows should increase just by 1. And for the second row, the chain 1 at the beginning is the only row where the chain 1 is counted as a stitch. So for the 3rd row, this end has 16 and this end has 16 as well. And the reason why for the odd rows we don't count the chain 1 as a stitch is because that would make this side be 17 and this side be 16, even though you're going through the same stitches, all the stitches, and you're doing your 2 half double crochets on each side up here. So for the odd rows, the chain 1 does not count as a stitch. The even rows, it does count as a stitch. And for the odd rows, you only increase by 1. So the second row was 15. This 3rd row is 16. I know it may seem weird, but that's just how the pattern goes. So the first row was 13, and then I increased by 2 for the second row, making it 15. And then the 3rd row became 16 since it increased by 1. So for the even rows, you increase by 2 since you're counting the chain 1 as a stitch. And for the odd rows, you are increasing just by 1 since you are not counting the chain 1 as a stitch. Even if it may not make sense, It is the way that I have found to make the ends straight, because in the past it used to be all weird, and this is the method I have worked with in order to keep the bottoms of the bikini top straight instead of curving weirdly, curling upwards or downwards. This is the way I do it. If I'll be honest, I don't exactly count the stitches I have. I just make sure that I go through each and every single stitch once, except for the stitches up here, and make sure I go through the whole 4 times, since it's 2 times on each side. So I just make sure that each stitch has 1 stitch inside, and I don't focus too much on counting because it may get confusing for one side to be different from the other side if you do or do not count the chain 1 as a stitch. So I'm sorry if it's confusing, but this is the method I have found to keep the bottom of the bikini top as straight as possible. So at the end of the row, chain 1 and turn your work. And since this is an even row, you will be counting this as a stitch, so yarn over and just start with your half double crochets into each and every single stitch. And then when you get to the top where the hole is, you're going to do 2 half double crochets into the hole. Then you're going to chain 1 and then do another 2 half double crochets into the same hole. And then you're going to continue with your half double crochets into each and every single stitch for the rest of the row. So for the 4th row, this side has 18 because I included the chain 1 as a stitch, and this side has 18. So both ends have 18 stitches. So keep in mind that odd rows are just +1 and even rows are +2. You're just going to continue with the exact same steps as the previous rows until you reach the measurements that you need. So you can either use the measurements of the circumference of the breast or the desired length of the breast cup that you want it to be. So to measure the breast circumference, you just go from one side of the breast to the inner portion of the breast. And then for the desired length, you just go from the bottom of the breast upwards until you get the desired length that you want. Everyone's different. You might want it to be shorter or longer than the measurements. It's up to you, however you want. So I am done crocheting rows onto this cup. So I'm going to measure it. And when I measure it, I'm going to hold this end down and I'm going to pull it. And it goes to 7 inches, which is the measurement that I need for my cup. And the reason why you stretch it when you measure it is because when you put it around your breast, it will stretch because if you're going to tie it, it's going to go around the breast tissue that you have. So that's why when you measure it, you want to make sure that you are stretching it out, unless you don't mind it being a little bit bigger, covering more. And of course, if you want it to be smaller and show more breast, you can obviously do that. It's completely up to you, however your style is. And if you don't want it being so see-through as this one is, I suggest using a smaller hook or doing single crochets instead of half double crochets. Whichever you want to do is up to you. For me, single crochets are not as stretchy as half double crochets, so personally I would just go with a smaller hook. I currently don't have my scissors with me, but to finish off, you would just cut this off and then pull it through to tighten it. Just pretend that this is cut off, and then that is your finished piece. So when you go on to create your second cup and you somehow forget how many rows you did, just keep in mind that the amount of holes that you have here are the amount of rows that you have. So just remember that, so way you're able to count easier and you don't get confused with having to count all of these. So that is how you create a cup for your bikini, bralette, or whatever you're going to make.